This week on Ridiculously Bored. The plane started going down. Okay, I'm going to die. I do not consider this to be even remotely a near-death experience, and this boat caught on fire.
Your mom, after she got on the other boat, asked for her dog before the kids. Throws his handcuffs on me.
Nice.
Comments, being a big guy, he actually comments, "You're lucky I got the fat guy cuffs this week."
Hey, everybody. My name is David Michael.
And I'm Michael Carter.
And we are Ridiculously Bored. All right, we're back. It's episode 4. It is it's good to be back. It hasn't really been that long, but how are you doing, Mr. Carter?
I'm doing well. So why don't you run your spiel that we talked about?
Okay, I'll run the spiel. So I had a few questions from folks just about subscribing in general. So if you are watching this on YouTube, click on the subscribe button, and there's usually a little bell icon that will actually remind you when we post a new episode. So you'll get a little notification that says, hey, log in and check out the latest episode of Ridiculously Bored. If you are on, if you're using like podcasts like Apple Music or Amazon Music or Stitcher or one of the 50 other platforms that are out there that have podcasts on it, you need
Sony Walkman.
No one's on Sony Walkman, I can assure you that.
Just checking.
Yeah, I keep checking. If you are on any one of those podcast solutions where you're just listening to us, hello, and thank you for listening to us, but also follow and or subscribe so that you will be notified when we release a new episode. It also helps us out because it tells all the gurus and the algorithms that that people actually want to hear what we have to say. And if you don't want to hear what we say, then what are you doing? Press stop. Stop listening to us. You're not allowed to. Go.
And the show's over. All right. I want to go over a couple. Spiel done. Thank you. I want to go over a couple technical corrections that we got from a few people. One, I only had one roommate.
Ever?
My wife definitely doesn't like to be called a roommate, but when we plan the Vegas trip each year, we plan it with one other guy. He says it came off that he was just one of many, and I think he got his dice in a vice about it. So I wanted to mention that.
I like that.
And then one last thing, one more winner from New Rochelle. His name is Frank Abagati, I think it's pronounced, or Abnati. He is the guy from Catch Me If You Can. So he was a forger, an imposter, went to jail for many years, and he was just an all-around con man.
So he was the guy that Leonardo DiCaprio played in the movie?
Correct.
Oh, interesting. One other guy we forgot, and I don't know, I can't comprehend how we could have possibly forgotten this because he's kind of like the podcast, maven at this point. Joe Rogan actually lived downstairs in the 3-family home that I lived in New Rochelle. Right. He was my neighbor. So I don't know that you could actually say he was from New Rochelle. I think he's actually from like the Bronx or something like that. But he did live in New Rochelle for a certain period of time. And I did get to meet him before he was famous.
Yeah.
So Joe, if you're listening, just kidding. Joe's not listening. I'm not even going to finish that.
All right. So last week we had teased about some near-death experiences. Yeah. And I think you have a couple more than me. So it sounds like. So why don't you open it up?
It depends on what you want to consider near-death experiences. The one that I always kind of refer to, and it's one of those really kind of scary ones. There's nothing funny about this story, unless like you want to laugh at people's reactions. But for a while, I was a director of marketing at a company called Insight in Tempe, Arizona, and I was one of like maybe 10 or 11 directors, and then we had a couple VPs and CEO and stuff like that. We used to do these corporate trips every quarter, every 3-4 months. And one year we decided to fly everybody out to Vegas, and somebody thought it would be a really bright idea to put the entire executive team on the same airplane because we were all leaving from the same place. And so we're on this plane flying from Phoenix to Vegas, which is typically a super short 45-minute flight. It just so happened that the day we were flying was a very crystal clear day with no crosswinds. Are you familiar with the concept of, God, what's it called? It's called jet wash. Familiar with the
Well,
concept of
I've
jet
heard
wash?
of jet wash. That's when it's from the back of the plane and you don't see it, so it affects your plane. But I would think a crystal clear day was a good thing.
No, crystal clear day is actually not a good thing. You can ask pilots. So jet wash is, if you think of a turbine, it spins like a fan, right? Air goes in one end and comes out the other. Well, when the air comes out, it comes out in a spiral. So on a typical day, there are crosswinds that dissipate that. Okay.
Okay.
When there are no crosswinds, that spiral just continues to spiral and spiral and spiral. And we were, I guess, about a mile or two behind another airplane, and we flew into the jet wash, and it almost flipped the plane. So we flew in, and I remember being a passenger. So we're sitting in the airplane, we're having a conversation. It's all good. Everybody's going to Vegas. Everybody's happy. Everybody's getting liquored up, and we're flying, and all of a sudden the plane just jerks 45 degrees to the right, and
Jeez.
everyone's drinks just kind of slide off to the side. All right. And then it kind of corrects itself, and a bunch of people screamed, and everyone was like, that's, what was that? And, the flight attendant that was, had the drink cart was like, drinks were everywhere. So it was a little bit scary. And then the kind of plane leveled out, and we were all like, oh, okay, well, that was a little, it's a little pretty big turbulence there. And then a second later, it did it again, except it did it harder. And then everything just slid, like the cabinets popped open, and some people's bags were sliding out. And then the plane
Did the oxygen things come down?
No, the oxygen mask never came out.
I'm defining this not as a near-death experience then.
The plane started going down. And so I know this because I put my hand down to stop because my body was sliding. I was on the left-hand side of the plane. I was sliding towards the middle of the plane. I put my hand across the aisle on the armrest of the person that was on the other side of the aisle. I had an aisle seat, and I had just drinks everywhere. And I looked down, which to my right, but which was actually down at this point. And I looked out the window of the plane, of the window on the other side of the plane, and all I saw was ground. And the plane started kind of veering, and it made this really loud, like, and we were like, and I just remember thinking, okay, this is it. This is how it happens. I've always wondered. This is how it's gonna happen. And we dropped about, I don't know, I want to say probably maybe 100 feet, and then the pilot leveled out the plane again, and then he kind of came on afterwards. People were screaming, like it was like a scene from Airplane, the movie Airplane from like the 70s, where people are just going nuts.
Without the comedy.
Yeah, without the comedy.
How long do you think the whole process was?
Oh, the whole thing lasted probably 35, 40 seconds tops.
Okay.
So it wasn't very long. In my, experience, it was the longest 45 seconds of my entire life. And and it was scary. I have never ever felt and had enough time to think, okay, I'm gonna die. Like I'm about to die. Like that was just the scariest thing ever. And then and then the pilot came on and he explained what happened, and we flew into some jet wash. Reason why we went down is not because we lost control of the plane, but we were trying to get out of the jet wash, so that we decided to drop in altitude. I'm like, you couldn't go up. Like you couldn't go left, you couldn't go right. Like you chose to drop a couple 100 feet in order to. I get it, but yeah, it was pretty scary, and I'll never forget that experience.
Yeah, I've been on some rough turbulence flights, but never one that is tilted to the side. And you talked about it, like when you go to Vegas, that's like the happiest flight in the world because everybody on the way there has aspirations of how much they're going to win and how well they're going to do. And then you come home, and more times than not, it's like the world's saddest flight because everybody's lost, or there's that one person who won.
Yeah, I think if it would have happened on the way home, everyone would have been like, all right, I lost my money and going down.
I have nothing at home anyway because I've lost it in Vegas. But, wow, that's pretty extreme, especially when you can see the plane sideways.
Yeah, it was, I actually I don't have reoccurring nightmares. I'd say maybe once every couple of years, I kind of have like a dream where I'm in that exact same like spot. And it was just because you never forget. Like I could remember what the person looked like that was sitting next to me. I could remember like where drinks were flying and the sound of the screams. Like all of that stuff is just stuff you just don't forget anytime soon.
did you act the way you thought you would? Like, did you joke around at all afterwards? Were you just like panicked?
Thing. I was like, okay, this is weird. And then I put my hand across to stop myself from sliding, towards the middle of the plane. And then I just kind of like looked, and I looked out the window, and then, your whole life flashes before your eyes. And then, that was it. I didn't, by the time I had actually like snapped out of it, we were leveled off, and the pilot came on and told us what was happening, but it was super scary.
Yeah. So that's the air near-death experience. We have a sea near-death experience that you and I were together for.
All right, you're gonna have to remind me about this one. You mentioned it. I don't.
You don't remember it? That's crazy.
This. All right, so I do not consider this to be even remotely a near-death experience, because we were probably less than a mile from shore. Like,
spoiler alert, we survived.
Yeah.
All right. So
come on.
So what happens is, a few years ago, I don't remember exactly how long, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, your father got
let's see,
a boat.
Based upon the age of my kids, it was probably about 10 years ago.
Okay. So your father gets a boat, and we decide to go spend the day out on the water with him. We went to the Mamaroneck Harbor, right? Yep. I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think your uncle has a boat as well, right? That was the other person with the boat.
Yeah, you're right. Because we were gonna go out to an island and then go barbecue and stuff like that. We're gonna meet them there.
Right. So first, I want to mention, for people who don't know me very well, I hate boats. I get violently seasick on boats. So the whole process of going on a boat, going somewhere, the water, I'm not a fan of.
Which begs the question: what were you doing on the boat? Why did you agree to come?
Well, because you were only in town for a few days, so it was going to be like a big get together. So that's why we went. Apparently, to get this story, that's why I went. So we go out on the boat, and I'd find we might have been a mile out, but a mile out in water, you might as well be in the middle of the ocean at that point, right? Because there was no other boats around us at the time. Not even your uncle, who had jetted off and left us. So the boat that we're on catches fire. So
the engine catches fire.
Something went wrong with the engine. The engine catches fire.
The boat catches fire. You can like splash some water on it and you're good to go. The engine catches fire. You're pretty much dead in the water.
I don't think you know how to put out a boat fire if you just think you're leaning over the side and tossing water on the boat to put out the fire.
Boat. This is like what? A 15-footer, 10-footer?
15 or 20 feet. So enough to have kind of half of the family on it, right? Yeah. Between you and your kids, me, my wife, and your parents, and then your uncle had a couple other people on his. Yeah. So the engine catches fire. We go through the fire extinguisher that we have on the boat. Worthless.
Still on fire.
It was still worked, but the boat was still on fire. The engine. Fire continues. I think we used a bottle or two of water.
Yeah, we did.
Trying your approach of let's just splash some water on it. So now the boat is stranded. The boat is stopped, right? Because the engine's on fire.
Yeah.
We are trying to signal somebody. And this is where I mean, where it doesn't matter if you're a mile out or fucking 10 miles out. It's the same thing. We're trying to signal people. We can't get anybody. The fire is it's not out of control, but it's big enough, right? And it's still kind of sectioned in the back of the boat. So one of the things that I got out of this, which I really appreciate looking back on, is I stayed pretty calm in the situation. Mm-hmm. And as I think you did as well. Mm-hmm. And so that leads me to
because it was not a near-death experience.
So we're going to go out on a boat, and I'm just going to leave you there for a while, and then we'll see what point you determine it's a near-death experience, and then the story will continue.
The minute you start driving away.
So we finally get your uncle now sees the distance between us is getting further and further away. So he doesn't know what's wrong, but he realizes something's going on here. So comes all the way back. Finally, he comes back, pulls up next to us. Boat's still on fire, engine's still on fire. We start handing people off to the other boat.
Women and children first.
Women and children first, in most people's view. So you don't remember this based on that comment. Your mom, after she got on the other boat, asked for her dog before the kids.
I don't remember that.
So, yeah, you don't remember that. I guarantee you my wife remembers it because we talked about it after it happened. So she's like, give me the dog. And I'm like, the dog. Look, for any dog lovers out there, this is not to piss you off, but I'm like, the dog can fucking wait a minute. Let's get the kids off the boat. So we got all the kids off. Your aunt, who was around the same age as you, right? So it's misleading that she's your aunt, but she is your aunt. Your aunt is kind of in full panic mode.
Yeah,
get off the boat, get into this, do that.
She's screaming
and
at
we're
us.
like, it's fine. The worst thing that happens is the fire goes up further and I just jump in the water, right? Like,
I think
I'm
she
not
was
thinking
worried it was going to
the boat was going to blow up.
Something like that.
Yeah.
She watched too
Probably
many
didn't.
action films.
Exactly. And then Arnold would come in. What's the problem? So we finally get everybody off the boat. The police end up coming, I believe, right? Because the boat ends up having to get towed.
We called the harbor police, and they kind of drove their little boat out.
Yeah.
We hadn't
we all got to the other
far
boat
out of the harbor, though. I remember us being pretty close.
So, I mean, that was the boat catching fire. Again, I get that it's not, I'm not running out of the towering inferno, but it was a boat on fire. I mean, I'm going to put that in a near-death experience category.
Funny thing is my son was so young, and he was at the time, very much into like police officers and firefighters and stuff like that, like all little kids are. And he got to ride in the police boat. They rowed us back to the shore. And I remember him saying to me, that was the best day ever. And I'm like, you know what? Your grandfather doesn't think the same. This boat caught on fire.
So... Well, that leads to you talking about your son with the police. Have you ever had any police encounters that kind of left an indelible mark on you? I'll start with one. I'll start with an easy one. I know
you have. I'm going to have to think long and hard about this one. I don't think so.
All right, I'll start with an easy one. I got a speeding ticket once. And for anybody at work, all of these stories that I'm going to tell in the next few minutes, none of these end with a record. I just want to be clear of that. Because there are some times where it seems like that's where it's going. None of them ended up with a record. So I get a speeding ticket and I try to fight it. So I go to court. So it was like a bad movie. The cop comes in, sits down, and he's whatever the judge's name. He's like, "Hey, Judge Jim, how's it going? How's the wife? Great pie she made last week." I'm like, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
If this is how it's starting, I'm screwed. So the judge says to him, "Okay, explain to us why you have qualifications to 1, be a police officer, and 2, to give tickets." So the guy starts going down this list and he gives all these degrees that he has and all these certifications. But the one I remember the most is him saying, "And I've also gotten a degree on how to judge how fast a car is going just by looking at it. I have a certification in that."
I'm going to call bullshit on that.
Well, it's not bullshit because he pulls out the certificate. The judge,
there's a class.
The judge says, "Okay, can you please show it to the defendant at that point?"
Yeah.
And the old saying is the person who defends himself has an idiot for a client. So I say in court, on the record, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
Oh, Jesus.
The judge slams the gavel down. He said, "That's your warning. Next word that you say that I'm not happy with, you're going to be held in contempt of court." So that next 10 minutes is the quietest I've ever been in my life. Court ended. I ended up paying the fine and leaving, but that's how that experience went.
Oh, Jesus. You had an experience in the back seat of a police car. You have to tell that story.
Well, there's also the one where when I was 12 or 13 years old, I basically made a business of stealing stuff from the local 5 and dime and selling it to other people. Or if I wanted something and because we couldn't afford it, I would just go steal it. And eventually one of the times I got caught and thankfully the detective or undercover cop or mall security, whatever he was, we just kind of walked outside, sat me down. He made me fill out a piece of basically a piece of paper that said something to the effect of, "I promise not to do this anymore." I was maybe 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And that was it. But the problem was somebody from school had seen it happen. And, one of the things you were telling me was that, because I didn't know this originally, but you said one of the kids in our neighborhood used to have a story about this.
Yes, he did.
What did he say?
You want me to tell? You really want me to tell me? Well, he said that you were stealing tampons for your mom. That's what he said. What he told me. I did not make that up.
And so the worst thing is it was only aspirin, but that story is much better. 1. 2, I really can't value that guy's opinion on many things because he was also the one that used to say a female's period was when she threw up from her vagina. So I don't even know if he knew what he was talking about.
Well, no, clearly they were just trying to get one over on you.
Yeah. And thankfully I defended myself pretty good in school and that kind of story went away.
Oh.
But the time I ended up in the back of the police
Hold
car.
on. While we're on tampons, I have a really good video called the Epic Tampon Run on my other channel, David Michael. You might want to go check it out while you're watching this, or pause the video and then come back after you watch that. But go ahead, Michael.
I prefer, I have no relation to that channel, so I prefer you wait till this show's over. And then if you have a couple extra minutes, you can go to his channel. That's
I'm
fine.
also giving away $500 to my first 1,000 subscribers randomly.
You're going to save that money.
I'm only have like 70 subscribers.
The story of where I ended up in the back of the police car. Now, in this case, I'm not a kid. I'm in my 30s. And I had been on rotation in Australia for a couple years. So the way the rotation came up for work was it came up pretty fast. And because of that, I had a car still that had 8, 9, 10 months or so of a lease left. So my old roommate took over the lease and we didn't change anything else. Kept the insurance in my name, kept the car in my name. He just paid me. I go overseas. I come back for his wedding, actually. I come back and he lends me the car while I'm home. And so we just got back from Vegas. This is what I mentioned in one of the other episodes, that this will be the first year we haven't gone. Every other year, even the years I was in Australia, we went. So on my trip home for his wedding, we went to Vegas first and then I went home. That's important to the story. So I get in the car. I'm going to a charity golf outing that one of our friends invited me to. Make my way, start to going. It's about an hour from me. I'm driving. I get to this area that says construction ahead. I start slowing down, but the cop is right inside the sign. First sign says construction ahead, speed limit goes down. The guy's right there. I get caught for speeding, pulls me over. Asks me, license and registration, that kind of typical stuff. I give him all my information. Now, I didn't say this to him, but I give him now my Australian license. And the reason why is I'm trying to avoid the points, forgetting that the car is still registered in my name. So I give him the registration, I give him the insurance, I give him my driver's license.
2 licenses? Did I miss that?
Yeah. I had an Australian license while I was down there as well as my U.S. license.
Oh, so you don't have to forfeit your U.S. license when you get another one?
Correct.
Okay.
So I give him the license and he says to me, "Where did you get this fake ID?" I'm like, "Well, what?" I'm like, it's not fake ID. And he's like, "Well, it's not a tri-state area license. Doesn't look like any one I've ever seen. I think this is a fake ID. You've now given me a fake ID." So immediately realizing this has gone sideways quickly, I say to him, "Look, officer," I said, "You know what? I accidentally gave you my Australian license. It's kind of on the top of my wallet. I live in Australia now. I'm only here visiting for a friend's wedding, and that's it." "Well, why is the car in your name? Why is the insurance in your name? Why do you have a fake license?" Tell them the same story again. Yeah. And look, I'm usually a little bit of a wise ass.
Yes.
One of the things my cousin always reminds me of the story where the cop pulled me over. It happened to be right in front of a speed limit sign. He asked me what the speed was. Did I know? And I pointed to the sign and said, "I don't know, 50." And so that one I got a ticket. But so the guy again goes, why have you given me a fake license? So I go through the same story again. Then I add, "Look, as a matter of fact, if you want, I have my itinerary in the trunk. I can show you my itinerary to show you that I'm only in for a few weeks. I live in Australia. That's my Australian license. I'm going to ask you one last time."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
"Why do you have a fake license?" So at this point, it's one of those, put my head down. I'm visiting from Australia. I just go through the whole story again. Right? Get out of the car. So I get out of the car. Because the whole, all right, well, here's how this is going to go down. Since you have a fake license, I'm arresting you. I'm impounding your car.
Did you say it's not a fake license? Not a fake license?
Not at this point. It didn't matter anymore.
I would have kept doing it.
That would be your Tourette's kicking in.
Yes.
So he grabs me, grabs his handcuffs, throws his handcuffs on me.
Nice.
Comments, being a big guy, he actually comments, "You're lucky I got the fat guy cuffs this week."
Oh, shit.
He goes, "Otherwise this would really hurt," because I kept telling him, it hurts, it's tight.
I'm surprised you didn't say, "You calling me fat, motherfucker?" That's what you typically would say.
At this point, even I realized that was not the next line to say. So he throws me in the back of the car, his cop car. We're sitting there for a few minutes. He starts all the paperwork, calls a tow truck. He has to wait for the tow truck to come and get my car, tows my car. While we're sitting there, he's like, okay, well, here's the process. We're going to go down to the courthouse, to the community jail. We're going to file a petition with the courthouse. You got to post a bond, and then you can leave, and you have to come back in a couple weeks for your trial, for this court date or whatever it was. So I'm like, all right, okay, fine.
Be like, I'm going to be in Australia in a couple weeks.
Well, those all questions came later.
Yeah.
So he's like, car finally gets towed. He's like, we can go now. Because of where he was, it was quicker to back up a half a mile off the highway rather than go like another 4 miles to the next exit. So he starts backing up. As he starts backing up, I say to him, do you have the lights on and the sirens? So he's like, no. So I said, are you going to turn them on? And he's like, no. So I'm like, can you? So he stops the car, turns around to look at me, and I'm like, look, I don't expect to be in the back of the cop car much. So if we're going to do this, we should do it right. I'm like, can you please turn them on? And he's like, no, I'm not going to turn them on. It's worth the ask. We get off the highway. We drive to the courthouse. On the way to the courthouse, him and I start bullshitting. And at this point now, he realizes he probably overreacted. Mm-hmm. I still don't think he believes it's not a fake license, but he realizes he overreacted. Mm-hmm. And he's like, look, sorry, but the process is in motion. I got to take you to the courthouse. We got to fill out the paperwork. We got to do all the next steps. It's like, you can post bond, or somebody come and post bond for you. And then you can go. So I'm like, fine. I'm like, how much is the bond? He's like, $1,500. I'm like, can I pay myself? He's like, why are you walking around with $1,500? I'm like, well, I just got home from Vegas yesterday and actually had a good run. I said, so I have $1,500 on me. So he's like, yeah, I guess. Yeah. He goes, I don't think that's not allowed. He goes, sure. Go to the courthouse. Does the typical like shit you see in a movie, chain me to the fucking railing. Oh, Jesus. Goes and gets the phone and is like, you have one call. Who do you want to call? So growing up, my dad had 2 rules. Amongst other things, wanted me to be a good kid, stay out of trouble, all this kind of thing. He had 2 rules. Don't come home and tell me you got somebody pregnant before you married. Don't call me from jail. Right? I wasn't calling my dad, no matter what. Even though I don't think I really did anything wrong, I wasn't calling my dad. So I called my friend, the other guy we go to Vegas with, who I was supposed to be playing golf with. Call him up. Starts with, of course, where the fuck are you? He's like, you're an hour and a half late. And I'm like, well, funny story. I'm in jail. So he's like, what do you mean you're in jail? I go, no, yeah, I'm in jail. So he's like, what do I need to do? How do I help you get out? Like, because he would be the guy. If anything happens, he's the guy I go to, right? For everything. When it comes to stuff like that, right? He's always been like an older brother to me. Mm-hmm. So he's like, what do I got to do?
3,000 miles closer than I do.
Well, yeah. Correct. I would call you, but then I would have spent a couple nights in jail.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's funny that his first question wasn't like, what do I need to do? I'm shocked that he didn't say, I knew this time would come.
All that shit came later. He laid into me later about it. He's like, I'm sure you mouthed it off to the cop. I'm sure it was what you said. And I'm like, no, none of that happened. I'm telling you, none of that happened. So he's like, what do I need to do? And I'm like, well, actually, they told me I can bail out myself. I'm like, so you don't need to do anything. I go, but I'm not going to come to the golf outing. I'm never going to make it in time. I said, after I get out, I got to go get my car. I'm like, it's a long process. So we do the paperwork. I pay the bond. I'm allowed to leave. He's saying, like you said before, he's like, oh, your court date's in 4 weeks or something. So I'm like, well, I'm leaving in a week and a half. I can't wait 4 weeks. Like, I can't move my flight, all this stuff. I got works waiting for me when I get back, all this stuff. So he's like, the only way you can speed up the process is if you go to court and just plead guilty to the ticket. He's like, you're just, basically all this is going to end up in is a speeding ticket. So I'm like, well, fuck it. I'm going to go to the courthouse and do it.
And so, the $1,500 is refundable, right?
Correct. I get all that back, and I just paid the penalty for the ticket, which is like $300. You just
wasted a bunch of time.
Correct. And I missed out on a golf day and money. So about a week later, I go to court. I do the paperwork. I pay the fine. Everything's done. I go back to Australia. In this time, New York passed the law. I lived in New York at the time. New York passed the law that there was not just a criminal penalty for a ticket. I guess that's considered criminal, whatever the category is. But there's also a civil penalty on top of it of an extra couple $100. So you get a bill in the mail for that piece. The ticket stuff you settle in court. The other stuff you get a bill in the mail. Now, I don't have a U.S. address anymore. Probably forwarded it to my parents. Got lost somewhere in the shuffle.
Never paid.
I returned from Australia 2 years later. I try to buy a new car. Go to call the dealer. Calls my insurance company, and they're like, "Oh, he doesn't have a valid license. He can't get a car. He can't drive it. He can't be the main point on it." So that's when I find out all this other stuff, that I got a ticket in the mail for a couple $100 more, which now there's penalties and interest.
Oh,
so that 300 is like 700. And I got to go through all of that now before I could buy a car.
Jesus Christ.
So
all because of that one. And he still didn't turn the friggin' lights on, that bastard.
No, I know. That's the moral of the story. Turn the lights on if you're going to do that.
Damn. So you've lived in New York. You've lived in Australia. You've lived in Connecticut.
Yep.
What's like, which one was your favorite place so far that you've lived in?
Well, it's hard to say because, New York is where I grew up, right? So that always has tug strings for me, right? Even my kids, we were in Connecticut by the time my kids were born. We specifically chose a New York hospital over the border so I could say they were born in New York rather than Connecticut. So New York always holds that for me. And my wife jokes because she's Australian and she came back with me, she jokes that she came back to be in New York, not in Connecticut. But we just get more for our money in Connecticut, so that's worth it. When it comes to environment, people, weather, like you can't beat Australia. And I also was very lucky when I first got there. And I mean, literally the next day. So the first day I landed, the next day my firm had an event. And at that event, I met a few people who would become lifelong friends, where I've been to their weddings. They've been to mine. We always keep in touch. The godfathers to my kids, because we baptize them in the U.S. and in Australia, just like you are here to one of them. So like, it's such an invaluable experience. Yeah. And the other thing too, like coming from New York, I remember the first few weeks in Australia. In New York, you look at somebody wrong, they want to stab you. In Australia, you look at somebody in a bar, they're like, "Hey, you must be by yourself. What's going on? How you doing? What's your name? Why are you here?" Like, it's totally different. It's just a different environment.
Is different.
Yeah.
The only thing, I've never been to Australia, but I see the types of insects and animals that come out of Australia. And I live in Arizona. We have scorpions, we have rattlesnakes, but like, and I'm fine with snakes. I'm fine with scorpions. I don't do spiders. And some of the largest spiders I've ever seen in my entire life come from Australia.
Yeah. If anybody wants to take a Google break and Google 10 deadliest whatever spiders, snakes, animals, things in the water, animals, at least 6 of them will be from Australia. Always. The one funny thing about the spiders, though, because they have a lot of poisonous spiders, and I actually at one point had they're called a redback. I had one of them on my balcony where I lived. And in a moment of not really thinking this through, I grabbed a lighter that you would use to like light a barbecue or something like that. And I started lighting him on fire to kill him. Thankfully, the wall didn't catch on fire. Like that didn't dawn on me later. I was like, gee, I could have set fire to the fucking wall.
Yeah, I don't know. If I see a big spider, I'm lighting the whole wall up anyways. I'll burn the house down just to avoid having to deal with the spider.
So speaking of living in different places, you've lived in a few, right? You lived in New York. You lived in Arizona for quite a while. You had a cup of coffee in Virginia or DC area.
Yes.
What about you? What places do you like?
Ironically, the place that I like and want to live is not the place that I've actually ever lived in. So of course I grew up in New York. I think that's no secret. Moved out to Arizona to go to college. Spent, some of the better 6 years of my life going to college on the extended program. Go ahead.
That's interesting. Was it a 6-year degree?
It was not. It was not a 6-year degree. Look at episode 2 if you want details on that. So, and then I did sneeze and ended up in Virginia. Actually, so I took a job in 2003 that was based out of, it was working for a media company based out of Washington, D.C. And so I bought a house in Virginia and commuted into DC. It was only like a 30-mile commute, but it took like an hour and a half, which was just insane. But I mean, if you've ever lived in New York and worked in Manhattan, because few people are, well off enough to live and work in Manhattan because Manhattan's really expensive. You're used to like a 45 to an hour and a half minute commute. And if you live in Connecticut, you're used to a 2-hour commute because you're just, you're mostly working in New York City and have to commute anyways. So, but I hated it was like hour and a half each way into DC, and I loved DC. DC to me was like a cleaner version of New York. It was identical to New York from a city vibe perspective. When you walk out of the subway and there's like 1,000 people on the street around you, it's just electrifying, and there's a lot of energy there. But it was very political, and I'm not a big fan of politics. We worked four blocks from the White House, so you could go have lunch out a block or two away from the White House lawn and hang out in that area. But every bar had politicians up the yin yang and senators and all sorts of people that just everybody's wearing suits and ties, and it just really was a little bit too stuffy for me. It wasn't my type of environment. So after doing that for about a year, ended up moving back to Arizona, and I've been out in Arizona ever since because my kids are out here.
So the unique thing was, if you remember, you decided to move to DC based on that the opportunity you got. Mm-hmm. It was, you said 2003. It was when you got in 2003. You didn't move to 2004.
Yeah,
because
2004.
You flew out east to go look for a house, right? You came out for a weekend to look for a house, and you drove up to where I lived in Pelham at the time with my roommate. And the reason why you drove up, it was the week before I was going to Australia. Mm. So you drove up for my going away party
or something like that. Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. So it was actually one of two going away parties. So I smartly separated the family going away party from the friends going away party. So I did the family one a couple weeks beforehand, where it was like aunts and uncles and some cousins who I don't necessarily hang out with as much. And then the day you came up was the friends party at my house, at my apartment. You left because you had to go back to DC. You left kind of halfway through it. Mm-hmm. Most of my friends, ironically, have really not seen me drink, right?
I've seen you drink maybe a handful of times.
And that's only usually in Vegas.
And I had to beg you to drink. Yeah.
That night was a colossal downward spiral for the whole night. We had people coming over who I had worked with who were like, just coming in for we're going to miss you, have fun. And they were like, let's do a shot. And then we had family members coming over and was like, oh, it's too bad. You'll be back in a couple years. Let's do a shot. So it was so bad that the next morning I woke up with bottles of alcohol in my bed that I don't remember ever drinking, like literally in my bed with me. Two, we went out to eat afterwards at some point in the middle of the night. And all my friends keep talking about was I was so drunk that I took my contacts off, put them on the tips of my fingers. And every time somebody would say something, I would point my fingers at them and say, I see what you're talking about. I see what you're talking about. And I would keep holding the contacts in their eyes. That's what I was doing. Yeah, that was an epic night.
Yeah, you have a tipping point. It's like an inflection point. Like once you go past that, like I remember the only times we've ever really gotten drunk was a time where we were in Vegas, and I'm like, the movie Hangover had just come out, and I'm like, we need to have a hangover weekend where we don't remember anything. And so you took that to mean that we needed to drink until we couldn't stand and vomited all night long, because that's what that ended up being. I remember waking up in the tub of the hotel room surrounded by vomit.
Yeah, and not all the vomit made it to the tub, but yes. But that goes back to, I'm not a big drinker. Mm-hmm. I don't really like the taste of any alcohol. I don't like wine, beer, hard alcohol, none of that stuff. So if we're going to have one of those nights, it's usually to have a big night. And yes.
And you just did shot after shot after shot.
Yeah. And then I remember the next day so in Vegas, we have a couple minor rules. One is we always do breakfast and dinner together. Mm. Which way we go during the day doesn't really matter. If we're around, we'll do lunch together, but some guys go to the pool. Sometimes some guys walk the strip. But the deal we have is we always do breakfast and dinner together. Mm-hmm. So after that, what you called the hangover night, I remember the next day you saying, I think you misunderstood. I just wanted to have a big night. It didn't need to end that way. And I was like, you're right. I thought you wanted it to be that epic.
Oh, no. I don't know. Epic is the word I would use to describe it. We were definitely blackout drunk, though.
Yeah. Yes. The other thing I remember is the other guy had his hands in his face at the table the whole time for breakfast, where he ordered with his hands in his face in his hands. He got his food with his face in his hands. He didn't eat any of his food with his face in his hands. We asked for the check and we left.
Yeah.
So that was the whole thing he did the whole time at the table. He didn't eat
I remember getting escorted back to our room at like 2 a.m. because we just couldn't be trusted to walk from the entrance of the hotel to the elevator without adult supervision.
And what would you say if you could pick a trigger point for the cops showing up in the hotel or the hotel security? What would you guess was that trigger point?
So obviously we didn't realize this at the time, but when we walked in, I'm pretty sure I roundhouse kicked one of the entryway signs.
That is correct.
That put us on the map.
Yes.
And then we were walking in and we were by one of the blackjack tables and a server came up with a couple bottles of water on her tray.
Okay, pause for a second. So there was me, you, the other guy who always comes with us. We tried, if you haven't noticed, we try to avoid names because nobody else asked to be on this, right? Mm-hmm. So we try to avoid names. But the fourth guy, I will mention by name because he was a little bitch, George. He saw the cops. He saw security coming in. He went and sat at a slot machine and didn't tell us.
Yeah, he pretended
so we
like
didn't know this was happening, right? So as we go over to this server with the water in their hands, he sits far away because he's like, I can see the cops coming in. Okay, go ahead.
Doesn't tell us. Yeah. So I don't remember what happened, but I've been told that I smacked a bottle of water off of her tray and onto the floor. Is that
simple math?
Is that accurate?
Three of us wanted water. She had 2 waters. You said nobody gets water, and you smacked the 2 bottles off her tray.
If I don't get water, nobody gets water. Yeah,
exactly
okay.
what
that sounds
happened.
About right.
And then the cops really now they came up and there was
they literally
5 or 6
were on
cops
us.
right next
like
to us.
Yes. Clearly they were waiting in the wings for us to do something stupid, and I fell for it.
So the cops at that point, I think they could tell that, look, we just had a little bit too much to drink. We weren't really going to cause too much trouble. But the cops said to us, okay, what are you guys doing? And we're like, well, we're going back to our room. The night's kind of over. So he's like, all right, great. He goes, if you tell me you can walk there without causing any trouble, I'll let you go. And I said, I don't think we can guarantee that. So the cop said, well, we're going to have to walk you to your room. So I'm like,
you're going to get an escort. Yeah, and we did.
So he escorted us to our room. Yeah.
That was probably the last time I've ever been that wasted in my life. It's been, how long ago was that? 10 years ago?
It's got to at least be 10 years.
It was at least 10, 15 years ago. But that was,
I
don't drink a lot either. And that night for me was the reason why I don't drink a lot.
It also makes it different because as you remember, and you might not even know you said this at the time, but priorities changed when we were in Vegas, right? Like people always think we go there for the gambling and the crazy nightlife and the seediness of it. No, we go there to gamble and to hang out. Yeah. So much so that all of us make pretty good money, and I still force us all to share 1 or 2 rooms connected because I'm like, that's the whole environment we're in, right? It's to be together, to goof around, stuff like that. So we always had to get rooms that are connected. So when we first went, it was gamble and drink all night, and that was kind of it. Mm-hmm. Then you were the earliest one of us to have kids. By the way,
when we first went, I was 17. You were 19, I think was the first time we went to Vegas.
The first time I was in Vegas, before we'll define as the guys trip continuously. Yeah, I was 19 at the time. Yeah. But then when, I remember when you started having kids, then it became, you were like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to gamble for a couple hours. I'm going to go sit by the pool and do whatever the fuck I want. And that includes reading a book and just having a drink by the water.
Just not being around the family
at home.
That was my vacation. Yeah,
exactly. So it's funny how things change. And then, So that's Vegas. And like I said, it's unfortunate that we're not going to be able to do it this year.
Yeah. Oh, well, there will be a non-pandemic trip soon, I hope. And then we can kind of take it from there.
Yeah, and that one might need to be like a 2-in-1, so that could be ugly.
As long as we don't do a hangover night, I'm fine with that. I think we need to hit up the one crazy question for this week. I think it's about that time. I should do some sort of intro one crazy question. Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, now do a good intro. If you're listening to this, David's face is defeated, was what that was.
Very defeated. All right. And this was you chose this one, so I'm going to let you go ahead and take it.
I'm going to ask you, if you could erase one past experience, what would it be?
This is another week where I feel like, and I thought about this.
Oh, you're going to be some fucking weak ass thing. If it's go back and kill Hitler, that's not the point of this.
No, I actually, and I'll be the first to admit I've not made all the best choices in my life. There are certainly things that maybe I would have done differently if given another, given the ability to do it again. However, when I look at every one of them, they led me to where I am today. So my answer is going to be unequivocally, there's not one thing that I would do differently, except maybe punch that teacher in the face when she was pulling my hair in junior high. Other than that, I can't think of anything.
So for future episodes, I would like somebody to call in so I can ask them this question instead of you.
I just don't have a whole lot of regrets. I mean, there are things that, I wish I would have handled differently in life, but most of them were like turning points in my life where I went from, one path to another. And it was like, you know what? If I undid that, maybe I wouldn't have my kids, or maybe I wouldn't have the job I'm in. So I kind of just went, you know what? I don't really think I would undo any of that stuff because they were, they lead me to here today. And, I'm really happy with where I am today.
I do agree that that's the difficulty with the question, right? And I don't think, the answer shouldn't be like a tug on the heartstring type thing, right? Like you've mentioned before, you've been divorced, right? You can't, and my words, not yours, but you can't say, well, I wish I never met that person, because then you don't have your kids, right? So like you said, there's a lot of repercussions from it.
Sure.
But one thing, and I'm sure there's more things that I really should pick, but one thing is there was a girl I dated who I used to work with. I would have no issue with that entire relationship being erased from my life.
Is this the one that punched you in the face?
No, that's a different one. It was an open-handed. That girl was an open-handed swing, and I don't necessarily have cat-like reflexes, but I would like to point out she missed me on the front swing, but I forgot she might come backwards and she hit me. No, that was a different relationship.
So does that make me still the only person to ever have punched you in the face?
No, one other time. And both of them yours was too, because we were goofing around. I turned the wrong way, you turned the wrong way, and you punched me in the mouth, right?
Yeah, at least that's the story I'm going with.
Yes. And that's also the story when I mentioned that at my wedding, got the loudest round of applause, more so than I think You Can Kiss the Bride. And then the other time was just some like street fight, but like some guy came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and I turned around and he just clocked me. Like, so there was
for no reason.
There was no, there was a reason.
Oh, there's always a reason, Michael.
Yeah. I just didn't know that he was going to tap me on the shoulder and punch me in the face. So it's a little different. So this person, actually, I started dating her, and I didn't see it in the beginning. And like, I have a history of, good or bad, right or wrong, I have a history of dating girls 6, 7, 8 months when I was single, because my view was, I think then they started getting comfortable and things changed, while I think I'm myself from the beginning. And I think that's where the problem started arising. So her and I worked together at my first firm out of college. Not my internship, but my first firm out of college.
Hold on 1 second. Is there a chance that she may ever listen to this?
If she does or doesn't, I really don't care. She's not I don't get along with her well. So,
it doesn't matter.
Would you like me to say her name, Dave? Is that what you're asking?
No, I actually don't want you to say her name, but I don't know, that makes the story more interesting if she could potentially be listening.
She might. I mean, I am friends with her on Facebook, so she might learn about it.
Yeah.
Especially, do not put in the header.
I have an idea for a thumbnail for the next episode.
Yeah. Michael wishes he didn't date this girl. Don't do that.
Every one of your exes will dial in.
So the problem was, as most relationships started off fine, didn't have any issues. Then it became, she was so needy was one thing, jealous was another thing, and then just overall had a pretty shitty attitude. And so, again, I didn't see it in the beginning. The funny thing is one of her best friends at the time ended up going out with and marrying my cousin, but none of us really talked to her anymore. So the couple things that happened with her that I'm like, this relationship is horrendous. I had 2 female friends who were staying over one weekend. So my girlfriend at the time was staying with me at the apartment, and these other 2 girls were staying in the apartment. She could not tolerate that there were 2 other girls in the apartment.
Even though she was there.
Even though she was there. Mm-hmm. So, at one point I was like, so what do you think is going to happen here? You think I'm going in the other room and fucking these 2 girls while you're in the apartment with me? I'm like, I don't understand this. Not to mention, I'm like, they're my friends. That's issues.
It. It's way bigger than just 2 females being there.
Right. So that was one. Then, another one was I couldn't just be home, right? She would call me and be like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, staring at the TV, vegging out. I'm going to come over. And she had to immediately come over. So it was I couldn't just relax at home. There was none of that. It was either you got shit to do.
Trust issues there.
You either got shit to do or we hanging out. That's how it was. So much so that she started renting an apartment that she planned on both of us living in eventually. And I'm like, well, that's really something that we should probably have talked about.
Did she tell you about that?
Well, she told me she was renting it and stuff. I'm like, well, this seems like a lot for one person. It's pretty big and a little expensive. And she's like, no, it's fine for now. And so it was one of those later on. It came out that, oh, well, I was renting it because I thought we were going to move in together.
Ouch.
So that's part of it. So the best part of this altogether, she comes to my wedding, my cousin's wedding in Canada. We go to the wedding. I'm the best man. And there's obviously a dance you do with the maid of honor, who, to be fair, was fucking hot. She was, right? But that's beside the point. She's the maid of honor, right? You have to dance with her. Mm-hmm. So the whole time leading up to it, knowing it's going to happen, day before, 2 days before, week before, you can't dance with her. You can't dance with her at the wedding. I'm like, how is that fucking possible? The way it goes is the bride and the groom will dance. Now we invite the best man, the maid of honor. Now we invite the rest of the wedding party. That's the process. I didn't make it up. That's the process. So she kept going on and on about it. So we get to a point where now dance happens. And at this point in the wedding, I am furious at her. I've totally had enough. So much so that soon after, when we got back, we broke up because I'm like, this is done. But the best part about it is for my 30th birthday, all of the boys you're a couple years younger than me, but all the boys I grew up with besides you are my age, right? So for the 30th birthday party, we all were going to do a big thing kind of shared. So, we had Big Daddy, Smurf, Cool, and Hot Chocolate, and the Mexican, and me. The Mexican's a couple years earlier too, but he's actually my roommate. So we're all going to get together and we're going to celebrate our 30th birthdays together. So me and Hot Chocolate decide we're going to drive to Canada. This is a couple months after the wedding. We're going to drive to Canada. We're going to go buy Cuban cigars because at that point you still couldn't get them in the U.S., unlike some of the rules that have been eased now. Mm-hmm. We're going to leave on a Friday. No, sorry, we're going to leave on a Thursday. We're going to drive all fucking night there. We're going to buy them. We're going to drive all fucking night back. And then we're going to celebrate on Saturday, our birthday, with all of us smoking Cuban cigars. So that's the plan we go with. It starts with, I know I'm all over the place. Trust me, it gets back to her why I wish it didn't exist.
Wrap it up.
It starts with, we start at Big Daddy's house. It was a good meeting point. Mm-hmm. He fills us up with a bunch of coffee for the ride because he knows we're going to be driving overnight. At some point, Hot Chocolate says to him, this isn't the normal coffee you make. What brand is this? So he's like, oh, well, this is some decaf I just got recently. Decaf? I like the way it tastes. And we're like, decaf? I'm like, we just drank 4 cups of coffee for a 12-hour drive that is going to do nothing for us. He's like, yeah, I didn't think about that. So we drive to Canada. We get there early in the morning of the Friday.
Where in Canada? Are we
my
Montreal
cousins. We tell my Toronto.
Toronto, okay.
We let my cousin know we're coming. We're like, look, we need a place to crash for a couple hours, to kind of regroup. We got to buy a couple things, and then we're going to probably make our way back. So we get to my cousin's place. We sleep for a couple hours, then we go shopping. And we go by the Cuban cigars. We go back to my cousins, and we're like, based on timing, we're going to hit rush hour traffic. If we leave now, we're going to wait a couple more hours. So my cousin's like, hey, would you be interested in seeing the video from the wedding? So I'm like, sure, why not? In the video, so Hot Chocolate picked it up first. In the video, you could see my disdain for her and the eye daggers that I was throwing her the whole time at the wedding. So much so that at one point she kind of came over to like, hey, let's dance. And I'm like, get away from me. And that all got captured on, not unbeknownst to me, it all got captured on video. So, yeah. So
wow.
I would have zero problem with that relationship being stricken from the record.
I don't even have any of those. I mean, they were all kind of building blocks. I didn't date a lot of women when I was younger. So, I mean, they were all kind of building blocks leading up to me getting married. But yeah, I'm going to come up with the next one crazy question. This way I'll make sure that I have an actual response to it, or an interesting
response. My response is going to be very non-committal.
I don't even think that's possible for you. Hit the joke vault. Let's see what you got.
All right. This is just a statement.
Uh-oh.
I think political unrest would be eliminated if foreign leaders were allowed to fart in meetings.
Okay. All right. I can see that.
So that's all. All right.
Next episode. Yeah, we are we talked about how far you and I would go to make someone laugh. Both of us were always like jokesters. In our group, you way more so than me, because I know when to take a backseat to someone who's typically funnier than I am. But when I was in my own circle or in school or whatever, I was somewhat of a, the kind of prankster and the jokester. So the next topic's going to be, how far would you go for a joke?
Now, I think at this point, I'm supposed to say to you, no, you're the funnier one, right?
No, I never claimed to be the funnier one.
So in your school, we've talked about it before, in your school with the small classes, 30 kids or so,
yep.
Every person had a nickname in the yearbook. Wasn't yours the Joker?
Yeah, I believe so. I had a lot of nicknames throughout my childhood.
That's the only one they could write.
Yeah, I was the only one that was going to get in trouble. Yeah. All right. We are done.
I'm Michael.
Hold on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon on YouTube if you want to be notified. And for all the other platforms that we're on for our listeners, please subscribe. If you're on Apple, iTunes, Apple Music, please rate us so that Apple knows that we're worth sharing with other people. Thank you very much. What do you have to say?
Thanks,
Michael?
everyone. I'm Michael Carter.
I'm David Michael. And we are
ridiculously bored.
You're
not even trying.
I'm not.